They sealed the coffin before dawn, but the story inside it refused to stay buried. An emperor who had once bent nearly all of continental Europe to his will was gone, his throne shattered, his empire divided among victorious enemies. Yet one question lingered long after the cannons fell silent. If Napoleon Bonaparte had conquered history itself, how could his bloodline simply vanish somewhere beyond the faded portraits, abandoned palaces, and forgotten battlefields? Whispers continued to circulate. Some claimed his family disappeared into ordinary life. Others insisted the Bonapartes quietly survived, carrying one of history's most famous names through generations that few people ever notice. The empire was destroyed, but was the family truly erased? The answer begins long before a crown rested on Napoleon's head. Before Europe feared the name Bonaparte, it belonged to a modest family on the Mediterranean island of Corsica. The island itself had only recently passed from the Republic of Genoa to France, leaving many Corsicans caught between two identities. Napoleon entered the world on August 15, 1769, only months after France secured control of the island. His family was neither wealthy nor powerless. They belonged to the lesser Corsican nobility, respected enough to receive opportunities, but far removed from the grand aristocratic families that dominated France. His father, Carlo Bonaparte, believed education could accomplish what wealth could not. His mother, Letizia Ramolino, possessed a resilience that would become legendary within the family. She endured hardship, political upheaval, and eventually watched several of her children rise to extraordinary positions across Europe. Few mothers in history would witness sons becoming kings and daughters becoming queens, yet almost none would also watch that entire world collapse within a single generation. As a young boy, Napoleon spoke Corsican before mastering French. His accent made him an outsider among classmates at military school. Fellow students mocked his provincial background and humble finances. Those humiliations left deep scars, but they also forged an ambition unlike anything Europe had seen. Every insult became another reason to prove himself. Military education transformed him. Mathematics fascinated him because it rewarded precision rather than noble birth. Artillery became his specialty, a branch where intelligence often mattered more than aristocratic connections. When the French Revolution erupted in 1789, centuries of rigid hierarchy began to crumble. While many noble officers fled the country, opportunities suddenly appeared for talented young commanders willing to embrace the new political order. Napoleon seized them with astonishing speed. During the siege of Toulon in 1793, his tactical brilliance helped French forces recapture the city from royalists supported by Britain. He was only 24 years old. Yet his performance drew national attention. Promotions followed rapidly. Still, few could have imagined that this ambitious Corsican officer would soon dominate an entire continent. Power arrived not through inheritance, but through chaos. France after the revolution remained unstable. Governments rose and fell with alarming frequency. Economic hardship fueled unrest. Political factions accused one another of treason. Amid this uncertainty, Napoleon's victories in Italy transformed him into a national hero. His campaigns demonstrated not only military genius but an ability to inspire exhausted soldiers to accomplish what seemed impossible. Each victory increased his popularity while exposing the weakness of civilian leaders in Paris. The Egyptian campaign that followed remains one of history's strangest military adventures. Militarily, it failed to achieve its ultimate objectives. Yet politically, Napoleon returned to France at exactly the right moment. The government was collapsing once again. Public confidence had evaporated. France wanted stability, and Napoleon appeared ready to provide it. In November 1799, he participated in the coup of 18 Brumaire, overthrowing the existing government and establishing the consulate. Officially, France remained a republic. In reality, Napoleon quickly became its dominant ruler. Every reform strengthened his grip on power. He reorganized government institutions, stabilized finances, modernized education, and introduced the Napoleonic Code, a legal system whose influence still survives in many countries today. But reforms alone could never satisfy his ambitions. Europe's monarchies watched France with growing alarm. Coalition after coalition formed to stop him. Austria, Prussia, Russia, and Britain feared not merely French expansion, but the revolutionary ideals spreading alongside French armies. Each war elevated Napoleon's reputation further. Every battlefield seemed to confirm that conventional strategies failed against him. Then came one of history's defining moments. On December 2nd, 1804, inside Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, Napoleon crowned himself Emperor of the French. The symbolism shocked Europe. Rather than allowing the Pope to place the crown upon his head, Napoleon took it himself before crowning his wife, Joséphine. The gesture declared that his authority came not from ancient dynasties, but from his own achievements. It was one of history's boldest political statements. Yet behind the ceremony lay a growing problem few spectators understood. Empires require succession. Victories could conquer kingdoms, but they could not guarantee the future. Napoleon and Joséphine had no children together. She had children from her previous marriage, whom Napoleon treated with affection, but none could legally inherit the new imperial throne. An emperor without an heir stood on dangerous ground. Rivals within Europe understood that time could succeed where armies failed. The issue quietly evolved into one of the greatest personal dilemmas of Napoleon's life. Around him, his brothers and sisters received crowns across Europe. Joseph became King of Naples before later ruling Spain. Louis became King of Holland. Jérôme ruled the Kingdom of Westphalia. Caroline married one of Napoleon's greatest generals, Joachim Murat, who became King of Naples. Never before had one family risen so dramatically in such a short period. To supporters, it looked like the birth of a lasting dynasty. To enemies, it resembled an empire balanced on fragile foundations. The Bonapartes suddenly occupied royal palaces from Madrid to Naples. Their portraits hung where ancient dynasties had ruled for centuries. Their decisions shaped the lives of millions. Yet beneath the glittering uniforms and imperial ceremonies remained an uncomfortable truth. Most European royal houses had centuries of carefully documented bloodlines. The Bonapartes had arrived almost overnight. Could such a dynasty truly survive? That question became even more urgent as Napoleon faced an impossible choice between love and legacy. The woman who had stood beside him during his rise could not provide the heir the empire demanded. Every victory increased the pressure. Every year without a legitimate son made the future less certain. The fate of the Bonaparte bloodline was about to depend on a decision that would alter not only Napoleon's family, but the future of Europe itself. The decision that haunted the emperor was not made on a battlefield. No cannons fired, no cavalry charged. Yet its consequences would shape the future of the Bonaparte dynasty more than many of Napoleon's greatest victories. By 1809, the problem could no longer be ignored. Napoleon had built an empire stretching from the Atlantic to the borders of Russia, but he still lacked what nearly every European monarch considered essential: a legitimate heir. His ministers understood the danger. Foreign rulers understood it even better. If Napoleon died unexpectedly, who would inherit the empire? Would France remain united, or would everything collapse into another revolution? The answer seemed painfully obvious. Joséphine could not give him a child. Their marriage had survived political turmoil, military campaigns, and years of public scrutiny, but biology refused to cooperate. Although Joséphine already had children from her first marriage, Napoleon needed a son of his own to establish a lasting imperial dynasty. The divorce became one of the most emotional moments of his life. Contrary to the image of the cold conqueror, historical accounts describe both Napoleon and Joséphine struggling through the ceremony. She reportedly broke down in tears. Napoleon himself appeared deeply affected. Even after their separation, he continued treating her with generosity, ensuring she retained wealth, titles, and respect within the imperial family. But sentiment could not outweigh politics. Europe's royal courts immediately recognized an opportunity. If Napoleon married into one of the continent's oldest ruling families, his relatively new dynasty would gain legitimacy almost overnight. Negotiations quietly began among Europe's most powerful monarchies. Behind palace walls, diplomats debated which princess might become the wife of the man many had spent years trying to defeat. Eventually, Austria agreed. The choice surprised many observers. Only a few years earlier, Austrian armies had fought bitter wars against France. Now Emperor Francis I offered his own daughter, Archduchess Marie-Louise, in marriage to Napoleon. The union was not built on romance. It was a political calculation designed to stabilize relations between two rival empires while giving Napoleon the heir he desperately wanted. The wedding took place in 1810. Across Europe, reactions were mixed. Supporters celebrated what appeared to be the birth of a permanent imperial house. Critics viewed the marriage as proof that old monarchies had reluctantly accepted the man they once called an upstart Corsican officer. Then, at last, came the moment Napoleon had waited years to witness. On March 20th, 1811, Marie-Louise gave birth to a son. Cannons thundered across Paris. Church bells rang. Crowds celebrated throughout France. The child received the title King of Rome, a symbolic declaration that the Bonaparte dynasty now possessed a future. Napoleon reportedly entered the room overwhelmed with emotion. For perhaps the first time, the emperor believed he had secured not only his empire, but also his family's place in history. The infant became known to history as Napoleon François Charles Joseph Bonaparte. To his father, however, he was simply the King of Rome. From the day he was born, the child represented far more than a prince. He embodied the survival of an empire. Portraits showed the young heir dressed in miniature military uniforms. Official ceremonies emphasized continuity. Every public appearance reassured France that the Bonapartes were no temporary rulers. They were building a dynasty that could rival the Bourbons, the Habsburgs, and the Romanovs, or so it seemed. While celebrations filled Paris, another reality slowly emerged beyond the palace walls. Napoleon's enemies had not disappeared. Britain remained undefeated at sea. Spain consumed thousands of French troops in a brutal guerrilla war. Across Europe, resentment toward French occupation continued to grow. The emperor, who seemed invincible, had reached the height of his power, but history often reserves its greatest reversals for those standing at the summit. Even within his own family, unity proved difficult. Napoleon had rewarded his brothers and sisters with kingdoms, titles, and extraordinary influence. Joseph ruled Spain. Louis governed Holland before resigning after disagreements with Napoleon's policies. Jérôme attempted to maintain control over Westphalia. Caroline and Joachim Murat ruled Naples while balancing loyalty to France against their own political ambitions. The Bonapartes shared blood. They did not always share the same goals. Some relatives admired Napoleon's leadership. Others quietly resisted his attempts to control every aspect of European politics. Personal rivalries, conflicting ambitions, and political disagreements created tensions that remained hidden behind official ceremonies. It was an irony Napoleon himself understood. He could reorganize nations with remarkable efficiency, yet managing his own family proved far more complicated. Still, none of these problems seemed capable of threatening the empire. Not after Austerlitz, not after Jena, not after Wagram. His victories had become legendary. Military academies still study many of his campaigns because of their speed, coordination, and innovative tactics. Soldiers marched incredible distances, Corps operated independently before combining at decisive moments. Opposing commanders repeatedly found themselves outmaneuvered before realizing the true direction of the French advance. By the early 1810s, Napoleon appeared unstoppable. Maps of Europe changed almost yearly. Kings owed him allegiance. Princes sought his approval. Even longtime enemies reluctantly acknowledged his brilliance. Yet, success often creates its own dangers. The larger the empire became, the harder it was to defend. Every conquered territory demanded soldiers. Every alliance required constant attention. Every victory encouraged new coalitions determined to bring him down. Then came the decision many historians regard as the turning point of his entire career: Russia. Relations between Napoleon and Tsar Alexander I deteriorated as economic disputes and political distrust intensified. Both rulers had once cooperated after the Treaty of Tilsit, but the partnership gradually unraveled. Rather than accept the growing tension, Napoleon prepared an invasion unlike anything Europe had ever witnessed. More than 500,000 soldiers from across the empire assembled for the campaign of 1812. It became known as the Grande Armée. Veterans believed another decisive victory would force Russia back into submission. Instead, they marched toward catastrophe. As the army advanced deeper into Russian territory, supplies dwindled. Russian forces retreated while destroying crops, villages, and resources behind them. The farther Napoleon marched, the less remained to sustain his troops. Then Moscow burned. Whether deliberately set by retreating Russians or through circumstances still debated by historians, the city's destruction denied Napoleon the comfortable winter quarters he expected. The emperor waited for peace negotiations that never came. Winter arrived, then starvation, then disease, then endless retreat. The army that crossed into Russia as one of history's greatest military forces returned as shattered remnants. The disaster changed everything. Europe finally sensed that Napoleon could be defeated. His enemies, once cautious and divided, suddenly found renewed confidence. Coalitions reformed. Former allies reconsidered their loyalties. Even members of the Bonaparte family faced impossible choices as the foundations of the empire began to crack. The dynasty that had seemed destined to rule Europe for generations was about to confront a storm no battlefield genius could stop. The collapse began slowly enough that many refused to believe it was happening. Even after the catastrophe in Russia, Napoleon remained convinced he could rebuild his armies and reclaim control of Europe. He had done the impossible before. Why should this time be any different? But his enemies had learned from years of defeat. Austria, Prussia, Russia, Britain, and several smaller states united in a coalition unlike any Napoleon had previously faced. Their goal was no longer to negotiate with him. It was to end his rule forever. In October 1813, the Battle of Leipzig, later known as the Battle of Nations, became the largest conflict Europe had witnessed before the 20th century. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers fought across the fields surrounding the German city. For several days, Napoleon displayed the tactical brilliance that had made him legendary, but this time, numbers overwhelmed genius. As allies closed in from every direction, the French army was forced into retreat. The defeat shattered Napoleon's control over Germany and encouraged many of his remaining allies to abandon him. The emperor who had once crowned kings now watched kingdoms slip away one after another. By early 1814, enemy armies crossed into France itself. Paris, once the heart of an unstoppable empire, prepared for invasion. Napoleon fought desperately, winning several remarkable victories during what historians call the 6 Days Campaign, proving that his military talent had not faded. Yet even brilliance could not replace the soldiers he no longer possessed. While he fought in eastern France, Paris surrendered. His marshals, exhausted by years of war, urged him to accept reality. Facing overwhelming pressure, Napoleon abdicated the throne on April 6th. The empire he had spent more than a decade building collapsed with the stroke of a pen. His enemies spared his life but removed him from power, sending him into exile on the small Mediterranean island of Elba. It seemed like the final chapter. Europe celebrated. The Bourbon monarchy returned to France under King Louis XV. Diplomats gathered in Vienna to redraw the political map of Europe, as though the Napoleonic era had already become history. Yet Napoleon refused to accept that history had finished with him. Less than a year later, in one of the most astonishing episodes ever recorded, he escaped Elba with only a small group of followers. Landing in southern France in March 1815, he marched toward Paris. Soldiers sent to arrest him instead joined his cause. Villages welcomed him. Entire regiments switched sides without firing a shot. By the time he reached the capital, King Louis XV had fled. Napoleon had regained the throne without fighting a major battle. The world watched in disbelief. His return became known as the 100 Days, but Europe reacted immediately. The Allied powers declared him an outlaw and assembled another massive army. This time they intended to ensure he would never return. The decisive confrontation came on June 18, 1815, near the Belgian village of Waterloo. Napoleon faced the Duke of Wellington's British-led forces while hoping to defeat them before the arrival of the Prussian army under Field Marshal Blucher. Early in the battle, victory still seemed possible. French cavalry charged with terrifying force. Infantry advanced relentlessly, yet delays, miscommunication, stubborn resistance, and the timely arrival of Prussian reinforcements gradually turned the tide. As evening approached, the Imperial Guard, Napoleon's most trusted veterans, launched one final assault. For years they had seemed invincible. This time they were driven back. When the Imperial Guard retreated, panic spread through the French army. Waterloo was lost. So was the empire. Napoleon abdicated for a second and final time. Unlike his first exile, there would be no nearby island and no opportunity for escape. The British transported him thousands of miles into the South Atlantic to the isolated island of St. Helena, one of the most remote inhabited places on Earth. There, under constant surveillance, the man who had once commanded millions lived out the remainder of his life. Far from Europe, he spent his days dictating memories, defending his legacy, and reflecting on the decisions that had changed history. On May 5, 1821, Napoleon Bonaparte died at the age of 51. The official cause was stomach cancer, a disease that had affected other members of his family. Over the years, however, theories emerged suggesting he had been poisoned with arsenic. Scientific studies have found elevated levels of arsenic in samples of his hair, but historians continue to debate whether those levels resulted from deliberate poisoning or were simply common environmental exposure during the 19th century. No definitive evidence has ever proved a murder conspiracy. Even in death, mystery followed him. But Napoleon's story did not end at his funeral. The greater question was only beginning. What became of the family he had created? His only legitimate son, Napoleon François, was taken to Austria after his father's downfall. Raised in the Habsburg court by his mother's family, the young prince lived under the title Duke of Reichstadt rather than King of Rome. To Bonapartist supporters, he remained Napoleon II, the rightful heir to the imperial throne, even though he never actually ruled France. His life became one of history's greatest tragedies. Frail and often in poor health, he grew up surrounded by people who viewed him as both a royal prince and a political threat. Every movement was carefully watched. Every friendship carried political consequences. He inherited one of the most famous names in history, but none of the power that had once accompanied it. In 1832, at only 21 years old, Napoleon's son died of tuberculosis in Vienna without marrying or having children. With his death, Napoleon's direct legitimate male line came to an abrupt end. The emperor had sacrificed his marriage, built a dynasty, and secured the birth of an heir, only for that carefully planned succession to disappear within a single generation. Yet, the Bonaparte bloodline itself did not vanish. Napoleon's brothers and sisters had children of their own, and their descendants continued spreading across Europe. While the imperial throne no longer existed, the family itself survived. Hidden behind changing governments, fading titles, and the passing of generations, the Bonapartes quietly adapted to a world where crowns no longer guaranteed power. That survival would eventually answer the question historians and curious descendants alike have continued asking for more than 2 centuries. Did Napoleon Bonaparte truly leave a living family behind? The death of Napoleon's only legitimate son convinced many people that the Bonaparte story had reached its final chapter. An empire had fallen, a dynasty appeared to have lost its future, the imperial throne no longer existed, and the child once celebrated as the King of Rome had died without leaving children of his own. For generations, this created a powerful misconception that Napoleon's entire bloodline had simply vanished from history. But the truth is far more fascinating. The Bonaparte dynasty did not end with Napoleon II because the emperor was only one member of a remarkably large family. His brothers and sisters had established their own branches of the family tree long before the empire collapsed, and those branches continued growing long after the crowns disappeared. Among them, Napoleon's youngest brother, Jérôme Bonaparte, played one of the most important roles in preserving the dynasty. During Napoleon's reign, Jérôme had been made King of Westphalia, a kingdom created from territories in modern-day Germany. Although that kingdom disappeared after Napoleon's defeat, Jérôme's descendants continued to marry into European noble families, ensuring that the Bonaparte name survived through legitimate generations. Another branch descended from Napoleon's elder brother, Louis Bonaparte, who briefly ruled as King of Holland. Louis was the father of Charles Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, the man who would later become Napoleon III. His rise remains one of history's greatest political ironies. After the original empire collapsed, few believed another Bonaparte could ever rule France again. Yet decades later, amid political instability and public nostalgia for Napoleon's legacy, Louis' son won the presidency of the French Republic. In 1852, he declared himself Emperor Napoleon III, reviving the Bonaparte dynasty for a second time. Although the Second French Empire eventually fell after France's defeat in the Franco-Prussian War in 1870, Napoleon III proved that the Bonaparte name still carried extraordinary influence decades after Waterloo. However, his own direct male line eventually ended when his only son, Napoleon Eugène, known as the Prince Imperial, was killed in South Africa in 1879 while serving with the British Army during the Anglo-Zulu War. He never married and left no children. Once again, it appeared that fate had closed another branch of the imperial family. Yet the wider Bonaparte dynasty continued through other relatives. Over the decades, leadership of the family passed through descendants of Jérôme Bonaparte. While they no longer possessed political power, they retained enormous historical significance. Today, historians generally recognize that living descendants of Jérôme continue the legitimate Bonaparte line. One of the best-known modern figures is Jean-Christophe Napoleon, often referred to by Bonapartist supporters as Prince Napoleon. Although France has been a republic for many years, and these titles carry no legal authority, he is a direct descendant of Jérôme Bonaparte and represents the senior line of the family, according to many Bonapartist traditions. Unlike his famous ancestor, Jean-Christophe has lived an ordinary modern professional life, working in business and finance rather than commanding armies or governing nations. His existence reminds us that one of history's most famous dynasties survives not in palaces, but in everyday society. Different branches of the Bonaparte family can still be traced across France and other parts of Europe through carefully documented genealogical records. Some descendants have remained active in cultural and historical organizations dedicated to preserving Napoleon's legacy, while others have deliberately chosen private lives away from public attention. Historians distinguish between confirmed genealogical descendants and the many unverified claims made over the years by individuals who have attempted to associate themselves with the Bonaparte name without reliable documentary evidence. The officially documented family tree remains remarkably well preserved, allowing researchers to follow the lineage across more than 2 centuries. Another surprising twist lies beyond the emperor's legitimate family. Napoleon is also believed to have fathered at least one acknowledged illegitimate son, Charles Léon, born from his relationship with Éléonore de Nouailles. Charles Léon's descendants have also been studied by genealogists, although they are not considered part of the legitimate imperial succession established by Napoleon's dynasty. Other alleged children have occasionally appeared in historical debates, but the evidence surrounding those claims remains uncertain, and historians continue to distinguish documented facts from speculation. Perhaps the greatest irony is that Napoleon spent much of his life worrying that his empire would survive only if he produced a legitimate heir. In reality, the empire vanished within a few years of his downfall, while the wider Bonaparte family quietly endured for generations. The palaces changed owners. The battlefields became historical landmarks. The crowns disappeared into museums, yet the family itself adapted to a world without thrones. Modern descendants travel on commercial airplanes instead of imperial carriages. They work in offices rather than royal courts. They live under the same laws as millions of other citizens. Yet every family gathering, every birth, and every new generation extends a bloodline that once stood at the center of European history. Napoleon's greatest victories reshaped borders, influenced legal systems, and transformed military strategy. But perhaps his most enduring legacy was something far less visible. It was not a battlefield. It was not a palace. It was a family that survived the collapse of everything else. History remembers emperors through monuments and museums, but bloodlines often survive quietly, hidden behind ordinary names and ordinary lives. That is why the answer to the question is yes. Napoleon Bonaparte does still have living descendants, not through his only legitimate son, whose line ended in 1832, but through the descendants of his brothers, especially the branch established by Jérôme Bonaparte, whose family continues into the 21st century. The empire disappeared. The palace became a museum. The crown was lost. But somewhere in the world, ordinary people still carry the blood of the man who once ruled millions.